Last round, the championship battle took a major twist. After Paul Jenkins had a buffer of more than 150 points, that massive gap dwindled down to just 58 after his worst performance of the season at Pocono. Now, the championship fight is expected to be fierce as we head to the home stretch of the championship fight. It's the final road course of 2020 as we welcome you to tonight's coverage of the ultimate Conquest Online Racing Association Throwback Indycar Series presented by 94 Motorsports at the virtual Sonoma Raceway in Sonoma, California. Tonight, it's the Grand Prix of Sonoma. I'm Justin Prince. Alongside the booth tonight is DJ Clark. Behind the scenes is our director, Sean Ambrose, and he's using cameras provided by Dougie Beard. Lots of preparation for tonight, lots of focus from what's expected to be a competitive race tonight. Plenty of storylines, including the best way around this track. Let's take a look at your GSRC lap guide to find out what's the best way around this 12-turn circuit.
Welcome to Sonoma Raceway, one of California's most famous road courses. It resides just north of San Francisco. It's been host to a wide variety of styles of racing, including sports cars, Indy cars, motorcycles, and even drag racing. But in recent decades, it's become most well known for holding one of NASCAR's rare road course weekends. For most tracks, this cornucopia would be a stretch, but considering the array of 5 different layouts to choose from, it's quite easy for the circuit to be adapted to any series needs. Most of the layouts clock in at around 2 to 2.5 miles in length and always feature an impressive amount of elevation change. This means many of the corners present the driver with a blind entry or apex. Some of these have a very distinct visual look, making them instantly recognizable. Corners such as the chute and the final hairpin feature street course-like walls surrounding the track, while the carousel is both picturesque and challenging. With few long straights, passing is often considered very difficult, but it rarely leaves races with a lack of action. Mistakes can be easy to make, offering opportunities for the brave. And it's not just the track itself which is tough. The pit entry's narrow path requires precise driving for those looking to make up time and leapfrog their competitors during stops. With more than 40 years of racing under its belt, Sonoma has become a staple for West Coast race fans. And what could be better than a glass of vino on a sunny hillside while the sound of engines echo around you?
That was a look at your GSRC lap guide for Sonoma Raceway. Now, let's bring in my partner tonight, DJ Clark. And DJ, as we talked about a little bit, 12 turns on this track tonight, 2.53 miles. It's going to be an exciting one. Your thoughts?
This is indeed the California roller coaster. Sonoma is one of the most challenging technical tracks anywhere in the world. Elevation changes, a multitude of different styles and types of corners. This is the ultimate test of driver. And more importantly, it's the ultimate test of patience, as there are only two real overtaking zones on this circuit, that being coming out of the carousel in turn 6 and down into turn 7, and then the blast towards the hairpin at turn 11. So this is going to be a test of driver's patience. This is going to be a test of trying to force the guy in front of you into making a mistake and not being the guy who indeed makes that mistake. It's going to be a fascinating race no matter what happens, though, Justin.
Indeed, and it's been a fascinating championship battle at this point, DJ. We were just talking about this before tonight. After what happened at Pocono, that championship battle has seen Brian Beard re-enter the hunt. He's now only 58 points back. He was as much as nearly 200 points back at one point a few rounds ago. But after a roller coaster of emotions at Pocono, Paul Jenkins' points gap has now disappeared. Andy Yerk, Robert Bluin, and Nate Burke continue to scrap for the rest of the positions in the standings. They are 349 to 500 points back in the standings tonight in that regard for the driver's side. And that makes things also important tonight for this 59-lap event. Let's take a look at your details.
As you see the details put up on screen right now, this is the 16th round of the Throwback Indycar Series, and it is the final of 4 road courses. We are driving the old school Dallara IR05s. It is a 59-lap race. Our fuel stint is about 19 to 21 laps. That's our estimate. It should be a 2-stop race. We are driving custom fixed setups across the board, so they are tweaked a little bit from the normal ones that you see. Most specifically, we have a lowered fuel limit to get us that wonderful 2-stop fuel window.
Indeed, a lot more to discuss on the strategy tonight, but before we get towards the race, I'd like to ask you real quickly, are you interested in advertising with GSRC? Our channel's 1 million monthly global impressions are a great way to get your branding seen by a diverse audience. Follow link in the description to the YouTube version of this broadcast to learn more about the Global Sim Racing channel. Drivers have already made their way onto the racetrack. 4 laps available in qualifying, 10 minutes of solo qualifying this evening, 18 entries here at Sonoma. And this could be a tricky one for even the best of drivers tonight, with so much pressure on the line.
It could indeed. Sonoma is a track that, well, as people like to say, it's old school. There's not a lot of tarmac runoff. This is a track that punishes you if you make a mistake. The only real areas of runoff that you see is going into that final turn hairpin. It is a track that if you step even a hair out of line, you're going to end up spinning across the track. So you've got to be perfect. You've got to be flawless from start to finish. And it's really going to be a test of these drivers' finesse and talent around this 2.52 mile track.
And not only that, the weather conditions will test drivers' ability potentially to adapt, I think, DJ, because it's been swinging a lot this practice session. Mostly cloudy skies. iRacing Day, May 15, 2020. Track temperature has changed several times since the start of practice. Right before the end of practice, it was at 89 degrees. It's already down to 86. And oh, by the way, there's also wind 6 miles an hour to the southeast. That is blowing from behind you, heading towards some of the tight hairpins at the end of the racetrack from the start and finish line.
That wind coming through there is going to give you a little bit of a push. It's going to cause you to overthink your braking zone. You're going to have to brake a little bit earlier going into those hairpins, going into those tight corners. We could see some guys making mistakes in the first couple of laps. That is something most certainly to keep an eye on.
Also something to keep an eye on, DJ. With this being a new build, there's a chance for a lot of drivers to have an adjustment period. Some of the discussion points, some new changes to some of these racetracks and how they adapt these drivers ready to adapt to said changes to some of these tracks this evening.
Exactly. You're going to see guys, I think, who are longtime veterans of iRacing actually struggle a little bit here as they try to take in some of these new things. iRacing does this about every 12 to 13 weeks. They update the system. It's all a strive to try to make it as accurate and as perfect as possible. But sometimes it does take a little bit of warming up period to it. We're going to have to see how everybody responds.
One of the drivers who will also be new for tonight, Ron Capps, the NHRA funny car driver, making his debut in the series tonight. His brother John will also be racing this evening. Both drivers do a lot of drag racing, but Ron, especially in recent months, with everything that's happened in 2020, has really taken to sim racing. Tonight we'll see how those drivers fare. They were 14th and 17th, with John being the faster of the two in practice prior to qualifying.
That's right, and John, known mainly for his stunt driving across the board. He's featured in many Hollywood movies, most notably Talladega Nights, The Ballad of Ricky Bobby. He was a featured stunt driver in that. As you look up on that qualifying board right now, Brian Beard currently setting the fastest time with a 14:055. To frankly the surprise of absolutely no one, is Beard was able to win 2 races earlier this year at Rockets Glen and Road America.
As a driver, if you're in the situation of Paul Jenkins, who, mind you, is second, is that a concern knowing you have to be near perfect now? Because he felt after the race seen in comment sections for our broadcast for that race that he felt the championship would be out of his reach. He still has the points lead, mind you, Jenkins does.
He does, and the way points are awarded, it's not going to be catastrophic if he finishes in a top 5 and Beard is able to run away with this race. He can still maintain a points advantage going into the last 3 races of the series, all ovals, which have been Jenkins' strength throughout this year. So if I'm him tonight, I'm going to focus on damage limitation. Trying to be calm, trying to be cautious. Somebody tries to make an overtake on me, I'm going to let him go. I'm not going to fight him for much. I'm going to want to just try to maximize the number of points I can get and let Beard not take too many points away from me.
Indeed, as we look at Justin Kirby now try and make his way around the racetrack. He's in P4. We also have Webker, who is looking to set his first qualifying time. This is the end of his first lap in the session, as he comes across with a 1:16.753 move up to 11th spot. like to ask you, where are some of the best passing zones of tracks such as this? And knowing it's a road course, there's a lot of grass and sand around this track.
There is indeed, as we look here at them coming around. The two best places to overtake are going to be turn 7. That's the long backstretch that Ron Capps is going to be very familiar with, that runs on part of the drag racing surface here at Sonoma. The other place to overtake is going to be the hairpin at turn 11. Those are the two heaviest braking zones on the track. They're going to be the best places to try to overtake. If you're gutsy, you can try to maybe go in through 1 and 2. That's a really, really, really daring braking move. But I have seen it done. It's going to be a make or break effort, though.
By the way, you may have noticed on the left side of your screen, the qualifying time increased from a 1/10 of a second pole gap for now for Brian Beard up to half a second. He's the quickest driver and already done his respective laps. At the top of the board, Scott List Ramler had his impressive run at Pocono. He's second curling in the board. Jenkins, Kirby, Stouffer, your current top 5 with a couple drivers still yet to put in a time. Compagnoni expanded the field now to 19 drivers came in the last few moments. John Capps yet to put up a lap time for this qualifying session. Ran the 1:17s in practice. Brian Greenlee's already done his qualifying. Ellis and Matricion have also not hit the racetrack for this qualifying for an official time. So at this point, what's essentially the game plan if you don't have track position like we've seen with some of the top drivers, where the split between the pole time and the bottom of the board is upwards of nearly 2 seconds?
Well, the easiest way to answer that is to just sit back, wait, and hope that there's carnage coming through turn 1. It's a notoriously tricky place, as we said, and it's one of those things that there's only really one good line through there, so you're probably going to have a little bit of contact at the start. If I'm sitting back in the back like Robert Bluin or Ron Capps or any of those guys, I may deliberately try not to get a good start, let things happen ahead of me, see if I can take advantage of any carnage. If that doesn't happen, it's then going to be a war of attrition. And once again, much like Paul Jenkins has to do to keep this championship nice and tight, it's just going to be a matter of hoping the guys in front of you can make a mistake, try to get up their gearbox. Don't go for any sort of Daniel Ricciardo, let we say, late braking maneuvers, but just try to pressure them into setting a toe wrong.
Should note that John Capps has now moved up to 14th with his last run, but Compagnoni among the last drivers who can set a time, about 30 seconds left on the board, and he still has this lap in his bank. Compagnoni, a 1:19 flat his best time so far, a 1:17.2 gets him up past both the Capps, up to 13th position at the dying moments here. An interesting qualifying session to say the very least. The split amongst the top of the board and the bottom board, overall 5.8 seconds, DJ.
It's frankly not surprising for a track like Sonoma. This is a track that is very difficult. You either love it or you hate it. And there are plenty of guys on both sessions. As you saw there, Jeff Wubker running out of time on this qualifying session and being relegated.
Before we head towards the grid, the Top Qualifier Championship is brought to you by D2 Race Designs. Let's take a look, in fact, of said grid as Brian Beard starts on the pole with Scott List Rambler in second. Paul Jenkins, Justin Kirby, Diego Asensnos, and Chris Stouffer round out your top 6. Paul Wildress starts in 7th position in the 67, but then Yurick in 8th. Owen McLaughlin starts in 9th, and Tyler Gore rounds out your top 10.
He may have been unable to complete that last lap, but Jeff Wubker will be coming home in P11, followed by David Hall to the outside of him. Giulio Compagnoni is going to be coming home in P13, followed by Ron Capps, and right behind him, his brother John Capps. Robert Bluin is bringing up 16th place, followed by Christopher Mistrioni, then Brian Greenlee, and bringing up the back of the field, not setting a time, Mike Ellis.
19 drivers set to take the starts tonight here at Sonoma. 59 laps on the docket. Gonna be an interesting one this evening for the Grand Prix at Sonoma. Now, I'd like to still take the time to look at the Top Qualifier Championship brought to you by D2 Race Designs. They specialize in creating personalized and customized sim racing peripherals, as well as providing the RC racing community items that make their days at the track more organized and efficient. The season's top qualifier win a customized button box, all thanks to the kind folks at D2 Race Designs. Brian Beard just so happened to lead said top qualifier standings entering today, and grow said gap today with Paul Jenkins behind entering tonight, 73 points. Nate Burke, Andy Yerk, and Eric Jeffers round out the top 5, a tie for P4. Of note, Yerk might be able to jump past him on the board, as no Yerk this evening, Burke rather, on the board. We have 2 showcase drivers as well, spotlight drivers specifically, Christopher and Paul Jenkins for this evening. We'll start with Christopher. He's in P6 tonight, a 1:14.958, has showed some consistency amongst the past couple rounds. He'll be looking for a good performance this evening here at Sonoma. The other driver who is our showcase is Paul Jenkins, P3 in qualifying, your points leader entering tonight, and looking to wheel the AeroX machine to victory lane tonight. Spotlighted drivers are brought to you by Midwest Simulations. If you watch the track, we'll watch the rest. Use the promo code THROWBACK for $5 off a set of their Spotlight visual spotting system. Find out more at MidwestSim.com. Drivers getting ready for the start of tonight's race. In your opinion, what are the keys to victory tonight, DJ, in this one?
Well, we keep harping on it, but it is just consistency, consistency, consistency. You may not win this race in the first corner, but you can lose it to certainly capitalize on an overused expression. But the biggest thing is that if you're going to be going, don't try to set the fastest lap time. That's not going to win you this race. What is going to win you this race is not making mistakes. And so the driver that is able to do that is able to keep it calm, smooth, consistent, never step a toe out of the line, that's going to be who ends up on the top step of the podium here today.
And of course, remembering back to Road America, that was a race where, yes, Beard came away with the victory, but it could have went either way. Drivers like Patrician and a few others were shaking up the strategy calls in that one. Do you expect something the same today at a track such as this?
I honestly don't. With the fuel window is what we're looking at. You're going to be coming in roughly, I think, around lap 19 to 21 is going to be your first stop of this 2-stop window, and then the second coming around between lap 38 and 42. The pit lane here at Sonoma is made for NASCARs, so it's a very long, very slow pit lane, and anything deviating from that 2-stop strategy is just going to waste too much time for you coming in and out of the pits.
Should note that one driver did miss the start and is elected not to start overall. Mike Ellis turns the field back to 18 cars. But overall, who else should we keep an eye on tonight as we get ready for this grade?
I think Diego Aseños is one to keep an eye on. He's had a pretty good track record on these road courses, as well as starting way back in the field here. Christopher Mastroianni had a couple of good runs early in the season. A little surprised to see him in 17th. It'll be good to see if he can maybe make a few moves going up through the field.
Safety car pulls off for its only time this race. We're all set to get going. The Grand Prix at Sonoma is ready to get rolling. Green flag is out, we're underway, and a great launch by Brian Beard. Paul Jenkins off and away to second, the rest of the field single files out.
Ramler just got caught napping there. He moved a little bit too far up the track coming out of the hairpin, and Beard was able to just put the pedal down as you see them going single file for the most part through that tricky turn 1 and 2 complex.
Now up the hillside they go towards 3 and 3B, all the way to turns 4 and 5, heading up to the carousel. Paul Jenkins back under attack, though, as Ramler takes second back. And Ramler, if you remember, was so quick in that final run of the race at Pocono, came just about a lap short of potentially winning that race. He's already up back to second after his good qualifying run tonight on the road course.
Ramler clearly taking none of my advice to heart and really attacking Paul Jenkins there. That's a tricky spot to overtake. That corner cambers down at a weird angle. Very easy to lose the car, so great job of him overtaking there as he now sets his sights on the leader of Brian Beard.
Currently, Beard up by 1.3 seconds already as they go back to the S's, heading towards the final hairpin corner. Still, Paul Jenkins falls behind by 2 seconds. As Setsno's up 1 spot to 4th. Justin Curry dropped to 5th. The biggest dropper off the jump was Robert Bluen, who's already back to 18th, minus 2 positions as Beard looks to check out. A couple drivers are starting to try and scrap though in the mid-pack, including both the Caps. John Caps already up 3 spots. Ron Caps just made a pass on David K. Hall in the back of the main pack.
John Cap's really showing some good moves here, willing to get his elbows out. As you can see, he's really doing a good job as you follow him here, coming up the hill into 3A and 3B. Once again, you can see here on board, watch this corner. It comes down. There is a little crest right there, a bump on the hill. Very easy to unsettle these cars there as you fly back up towards the carousel into turn 6. Beautiful corner, blind entry, left-hander sweeping downhill, and Cap starts to lose it. Oh, commentators, curse as he slides back across the track.
And John Caps just stays out of trouble. Everyone passes on by. So all of a sudden, Caps goes from +3 in the race to -3. Meanwhile, the battle for P4 starting to heat up. Jenkins has been able to break away from this group, but Kirby wants to try and jump to the head of said group.
As you look at the back here of Diego Senos' car, Kirby getting a little wide there. That's going to compromise him very, very slightly. He carried too much speed through the hairpin. As you see them now, as they start to get back onto the main stretch here, shooting up to 1 and 2, Kirby's going to have to sit back and wait a little bit, as it's very dangerous to pass through this left-right uphill complex. He may be able to try and move again at the hairpin, but it looks like he's just lost a little bit too much to Asenos there.
Asenos specifically is as one of the main things when it comes to road course racing. I've talked to a few people before in open wheel racing. It's been a major factor in a lot of sim races recently. How much of that is a factor in your opinion with this chassis here at Sonoma?
This is a tricky car to drive. You know, these are the old Indy cars. There's a lot of downforce on these cars. There are a lot of top-loaded downforce so that you get a little bit of aero wash even on a heavy car like this. But because they're not as updated as, say, the new IR18s that they run, they're a little bit more stable. You can get used to them a little bit more than the other cars, but they're still tricky. They want to twitch away. They want to move around, as we saw John Capps taking to the off-roads there, as they are easy to lose.
So John Capps, your first driver having to use a tow truck in the race. He was back in 18th position as mentioned. Ron Capps also had a problem this lap. He is now 7 seconds behind the next car, but this respective grouping still seeing the Sentinels hold on in front of Kirby. Kirby just can't get the run yet, as this may open up the door a little bit. A Sentinels would have been a mistake, just couldn't make the pass.
There you go. Once again, Justin Kirby just keeping his nose in there, forcing Diego Asenos into a mistake, as it looks like Kirby himself made a little bit of a mistake coming up through 3A and 3B, letting Asenos slip away. But that's exactly how you overtake in Sonoma. You just put pressure on the driver and...
Oh, trouble, Rambler! Rambler's off the track, and off to the racetrack as well goes Kirby. Everybody's making mistakes in the carousel early.
That corner just catching everybody out. That's Capps, Kirby, and Rambler, as the top 5 have now been completely jumped as we jump back here to a replay.
Now let's take a look. This is Kirby. We're on board as he entered the corner. You see that little wiggle right there just sent him off spinning, and on top of that, he was lucky he didn't hit Rambler, who also had spun that lap from second.
As we go with Rambler here, Rambler just classic bit of oversteer as it starts to come around, and you're going to see Kirby popping into view right there. I think with Justin Kirby, that's just a classic case, seeing him go away and losing it. And that's not exactly uncommon as we're back on here, back onto the main straight.
Indeed, as Paul Jenkins is now back up to second as a result of that mistake. A Sentinel's up to third. Stouffer and Wildridge round out your top 5 at the moment, separated by about 8 seconds. This is now towards the rhythm portion of the race, so to speak, because it's still early on, yes, but you mentioned the fuel numbers. When you add it up in your head, a 59-lap race, if you have to pit early both stops, that might be tied on making it to the end of the race, based on those numbers, DJ.
It's going to be very, very tricky. If you're going to have to try to make a long stop work at some point, you're going to have to push to 20 or 21 laps regardless of when you stop, pretty much. So it's either a matter of, if you want to go as fast as you can, not worry about fuel in the first, maybe second stint, and then try to go long in the third, or try to reverse it. If I'm these drivers, I'm going to try to go as long as possible for as long as possible. Stretch the fuel out, get it going as much as I can, because then on that last stop, either you have to worry less about fuel saving, and or you only have to take on as much fuel as you need. You get to take on less fuel, spend less time in the pits.
Indeed, your race leader is still checking out 1:15.4. Only about 2 seconds of fall off so far. That's about 3/4 of a second minimal quicker than everybody else. The pace separation started to build up because Rambler's still quick, but drivers in P8 on back, they're running about nearly 2 seconds off the ballpark of Brian Beard at the moment.
They are, but this is where the action is you see Jeff Wubker and I think Justin Kirby. They're a little bit as we jump on board with Kirby. He's going to try to do the same move he was doing on Diego Asensnos. As we look here, somebody running wide up ahead there. Hope they don't run into him as Kirby's able to avoid it.
That was Tyler Gore, able to keep off him, though. Gore drops to the back end of the line here. Let's take a look at what happened to Gore. Should note Kirby did make the pass into the entrance of the carousel, and you've seen the left side tires in the sand. Likely may have been a factor, as he also had a mistake, it looks like, a couple times that lap.
As we go on back with him here, comes up through turn 1 and 2, nice and easy, and then just carries too much speed up through 2, off into the grass, starts to go down. As he goes down here into 3 and 3A, and it looks like he just starts to make the exact same mistake, carries too much speed on the exit of the corner, forced to go wide. Actually, very heads up from him there to just kind of get in the way, recognize that if he had kept trying to go on track, he could have caused it.
Meanwhile, checking back inside pack, Owen McLaughlin is still in this grouping as well. Try and stay front of Gore, but has also been keeping Wubker in check so far amongst this grouping. Top 10 so far. He's in that blue car you see up front as Gore is already caught up back up to him despite his mistake. That was about from a second or so back.
Gore clearly has a car under him. He's driving with a little bit of a red mist. It's going to be careful here as Gore loses once again, just stepping out, getting that toe of a tire onto the grass and losing it.
Well, we talked about it before. If you touch the grass, it's like hot lava. You're likely going to get bitten by it and burned by it. And that time, Gore's tires get burned and another car is spun around to the carousel. That was Justin Kirby who went around, all while P4 is still shuffling around because Rammer and Wildridge are still fighting along with the Sense-Nose in this grouping.
Well, there's one thing to be sure is that Sonoma does not take away from a good race here as you watch Ramler, Wildridge, and Asesnos all right there, pretty much 1, 2, 3. Asesnos able to pull up a little bit behind Wildridge through the hairpin. We'll have to see what he can do on this next lap if he's able to push his advantage.
Curious as well, but Asesnos has technically been going a bit further back in terms of the lap times. Before he was quick on the short run, remember, he's now falling back a little bit. Meanwhile, drivers such as others trying to sort themselves up. Should note that Bluin has now pulled on to the tow truck for him. He's the third driver who's had to use a faster pair. He apparently elected to come down to the pit lane after a rough race so far and missed his stall, and now he's your second DNF. Or rather, your first DNF. We've had one DNS this evening in Ellis.
Sonoma takes no prisoners, Justin, and it's not taking any tonight, as this is truly going to be a war of attrition. As we watch there, the different lines you can take through turn 7 and 7A. It's a weird corner. It's not really a hairpin. It's technically a 2 apex corner, and you can see the difference of lines and not really any speed getting lost between the two of them here, between Wildridge and Asesnos.
Yeah, and you can see, though, at the same time, there's just seeming like the differences in brake markers, and was hearing some of the drivers discuss that there is no ability to change the brake bias, for example. Whatever the fix set has, you have to adjust to it for what the setup is for this respective race, and we've seen different ways the drivers have been handling it. Some seem to be, for example, you've seen in turn 2 taking it closer to the curbs. Drivers like Wildridge are trying to use as much track as they can to try and exit the corner.
Yeah, this is not a highly adaptable car like the IR18 that has all of the onboard adjustments like the anti-roll bars and the brake bias and the weight jacker. This is set. What you've got is what you've got. So these guys are having to take different lines to fit their driving styles. Different can affect it. As we go on board with Diego Asesnos, you see it right there. He's taken that closer line through 7 and 7A, really trying to maximize the amount of time he has to spend on the tarmac, whereas Paul Wildridge able to take more speed through the corner. It's almost like watching a dirt track race where you've got two lines taken through the same corner.
Absolutely, and You can see that little bit of bounce from up front, but again, just not able to close up still as the Sense knows, despite some of the larger Sens. In terms of the tire management, what kind of goes through your mind in that? Because eventually, you can't make that grip stick, you'd have to think, right? By setting it so deep on the late brake?
You can't. You have to really, after about, I would say, 5 to 6 laps, focus on pulling back and taking care of the tires. You can go full send on those first couple laps, but if you know you're not going to get by this guy, it then becomes, okay, I'm just going to sit back and hope he makes a mistake. Because if you push too hard on an already tricky track, we've seen how easy it is to run wide, specifically at the exits of turn 2 and turn 3. If you push too hard, overheat these tires, and lose a little bit of grip, it becomes all the easier to just send it over the line and get up into that grass.
Sentinel still falling on behind. Should note that there has turned a bit of a slipstream train forming for P8 on back on the racetrack. That's where Wubker, Matricion, surprisingly, McLaughlin and company have now sorted themselves out. They also have picked up Justin Kirby in that respective grouping at the arm of the racetrack. So it's now getting similar to what was seen a little bit early on at Road America, where once you get into a couple group of drivers, 1, 2, potentially up to 4 cars, you're likely sticking with the cars the rest of the race.
It's very true. The only difference here being, unfortunately, as compared to Road America, is that, as we watch here, somebody headed off once again as Wildridge goes by. That would be John Capps going off there a little bit wide. Thank you, Mr. Director, for telling us. The only difference here is that where in Road America, you're able to really maximize that slipstream. These cars are obviously designed to be able to run both oval and road, but they tend to favor a little bit more of oval circuits, as that's what the IRL was running at the time. So they love to run in a good draft like that. And on a track like Sonoma, that's a lot more twisty and turny, and you've got to worry more about the aero wash and the loss of downforce from following a car, it gets infinitely more difficult to follow behind.
Indeed. We're talking about that grouping about 7th on back. They have now gotten towards Andy York for the head of the slipstream train, and this has been an interesting one where, keep in mind, one of the aspects, for example, for series like the Major Series in a couple hours with the newer chassis is, on the road course, they have pushed to pass. With this older chassis, they did not have that. So it's basically not as simple as, okay, I've got a button to give me some boost down the straights. We're here at Sonoma. You have to basically outdrive the drivers in front of you.
Exactly. And the bit of history on that is that push to pass was actually an invention from Champ Car, kart, whatever variation you wanted to run with on that side. These cars were the cars that were used during the Indy Racing League. They did not have it. Push to pass did come into use on these cars, but it did not come into use until the remerger of the two series in about 2008, 2009. So when these cars were originally invented, when they were originally put on the service, they did not have them. That's why we do not have them today.
Indeed. And Andy York is still now pulling away a little bit from this grouping. Still going to be interesting, though, how Wubker handles Matricion. And the crazy thing is, Matricion had a horrific start to this race, DJ. He lost just about all his spots on the grid. He's already up to a +8. Remember, he was one of your biggest movers. In fact, I believe he was the biggest mover and the last road course race.
He was, and he's putting in another impressive performance here tonight. He's worrying me a little bit. He's diving a little bit later into the corners. It's going to be interesting to see here as we are on lap, as the leaders cross for the last 13 right now, to see how his tires hold up. As you look up ahead there, is Jeff Wubker getting a heck of a run on Andy York, and so is Christopher Matricion. Here we could see a dive bomb into the hairpin. Nope, he decides to check up, but York and Wubker almost come together, and that's going to give Matricion the place as they go down to a drag race down the front stretch.
Bit of a run, though, on that line. Wubker, though, decides to give it to him along with Justin Kirby. Might have been a smart move because I don't think you want to go side-by-side off in the turn 1 and 2 with an IndyCar here.
No, that is a one-way ticket to end it up on the grass, and we've seen exactly what that can do to these cars. So very, very heads up there if Jeff Wubker lives to fight another day and to just keep alive during this race, trying to maximize a few points here for him.
Now the curious thing is, can Matricion keep the forward push? 1:17.5s right now is his lap time pace, his fastest top of the 1:16s. The leaders, they're still running the 1:15s in the top 3. Matricion with a good run, though, on the outside. York gives it to him. So a +10 already for the man who finished P2 in the last road course race in this series.
Really, really nice job there on the brakes from Attrition. This is one of those moments, I think, when he had to be on maximum attack, be late onto the brakes, push hard into it, and I think now you're going to see him start to cool his tires a little bit, maybe try to consciously run a little bit of a slower lap, just enough to pull out ahead, but not as to be as difficult on the tires as he was going in there, as that is how you've got to run this race. And behind him, this battle just continuing to get excited with Jeff Wubker now starting to poke his nose up the inside of Justin Kirby.
A little bit of a peak, but not able to make any move quite yet. They still also have McLaughlin, mind you, in this slipstream train, as Patrician now just about broke it, and now Yerk seems to be really struggling. His fall off is nearly 2 seconds already in this race, and the average lap times for Yerk compared to the cars behind shrinking. Off into the sand he goes. Yerk loses 1 spot. Wubker now takes away a 2nd spot.
Once again, those tires just getting a little overheated, losing a little bit of grip on the outside of 3 and 2, and it'll send you right to the back of the line. As we also saw Christopher Mistricion doing the same thing coming out of 3, just kicking up a little bit of dust there. I think he may have overcooked it a little bit, and he's going to have to back off now, try to get his tires to cool and last for another 5 or so laps.
Yeah, we're still approaching that first pit window expectation and estimate. 45 to go this time by for this group. And the interesting thing I want to ask about as well is, let's say you have lap traffic, because you do have Ron and John Capps who are already a lap down in this race. How do you manage that if you have this massive pack? Because they're about a couple laps away from reaching them here.
Well, the race control talked to everybody about it beforehand and sort of reminded everybody that, listen, if you're a first-time driver coming in here, even if your last name is Capps and you've got a little bit of stardom coming behind you, remember the championship leaders. Be kind, be courteous, try to get out of the way the best that you can. If you're stuck in a corner, that's okay. Don't do anything unpredictable. If you're coming up behind them as one of the championship leaders, it's got to be about timing the passes right, because if you get caught behind these guys coming through the S's of 8, 8A, and 9, you can lose up to a second a lap. So you've really got to be looking about 10 seconds ahead of you, looking at your relative times, listening to everything around you, and being aware of it, trying not to catch too fast if that's what the case may be, and just being heads up.
100% on that one. New purple lap time, by the way, by Brian Beard as the fuel starts to burn on his car. He needs by 9 seconds. Should note the prior 3 to 4 laps, he wasn't the fastest car on the racetrack. Scott List Rambler was, who is still 11 seconds behind after his poor start. So the pace picking up for some of the top runners, even with the tire wear, as the fuel starts to line these cars as he waves hello to Ron Capps.
Capps being very smart there, just letting him go there on the inside of the carousel. But Beard just putting on an absolute master class here as you see him come through that 7 and 7A complex, going down back into the S's. He's not pushing too hard. You can see there very smooth movements on the wheel, trying to minimize the effect on these tires. Probably doing a little bit of lifting and coasting here, trying to save as much fuel as possible to just extend that lead as safe as he can be.
Absolutely. Making his way through the hairpin once again, a couple laps until the estimated pit window. Jenkins is still in 2nd spot, by the way, but Rambler is closing up quickly. Kirby and Matrician are also starting to scrap a bit. As Kirby's made the pass on Matrician, they're also trying to work their way around some of the traffic here. Making his move there, and one car just spun in the backdrop. Believe that was John Capps, who may have spun out onto the corner exit.
I think you may be right. It is indeed John Capps. As we jump back here for a replay, you see him just coming down into that hairpin at turn 7, puts the power down just a little bit too much, and the car snaps right around. These Indy cars are very fast. They've got a lot of horsepower and torque coming through the back of them, and he is not the only guy to have ever done that in these cars.
We talked about him with his drag racing experience as well as his stunt experience. Recently worked on Ford versus Ferrari. Also part of the Fast and Furious 9th movie in that series coming up. It's not as easy as it is to race in real life, though, than it is on the sim, because there are massive differences in some cases, like we've seen for some of these drivers as we see Wubker. In a bit of trouble.
As Mistrician spins there, he was in a little bit of trouble right before that. He looks almost beached up on the hill. We're going to jump back to replay and see what happened.
Yes, indeed. He actually gained a spot back because Yerk also made a mistake the following corner. So it was a mess in this grouping. You'll see it starting here. Overshoots the corner, ends up actually hitting the tire barrier. May have caused some tire damage, and then he gets back going. Watch though some of the cars up in front. Yerk in turn overshoots his corner, coming off of 3A, and then this stacks everyone up as there's contact from behind that bumps off and away Matricion for a secondary spin.
And that's one of the things that can happen here at Sonoma. You have to be so focused on what's in front of you because there's so many blind corners, and you've got to be looking as soon as you get over that crest to the next corner, lining it up, thinking about it, that sometimes if somebody makes a mistake in front of you, goes off wide, that'll draw your attention. Matricion coming down into the pits here. He is going to be the first of our main runners to jump into the pits on lap 17.
A little bit on the early side, but expected when you have several spins on a lap. Also trouble for McLaughlin this lap from the top 10 at the other end of the racetrack. He's now crashed and lost several positions, should note, in the 90 car. So the pit window's open. Matricion's going to be very tight now on field the rest of this race, potentially, DJ.
He's going to really have to make it work here. As I think about lap 18 and many Hail Marys was the only way to make this work. So we're going to have to see if Christopher Matricion can be as light as possible on that right foot and try to make some fuel out of nothing.
And also this pit exit can be very tricky here. You've seen why. Goes right into the racing line in turn 1 and then forces you out of the racing line by turn 2 if you are in traffic, and in turn that actually cost Matricion about an extra second or so, and he still got to make his way around this track to start the run on cold tires, and he nearly overshot the corner on them.
Cold tires can be an absolute bear on this circuit, coming out of the pits like that, and glad that you brought up the attention to that pit exit. That's something else that Race Control has talked to these Throwback IndyCar Series drivers about. When you do exit the pits, they have asked that you stay as far left as possible through the exit of turn 2 to allow for any traffic behind you to stay on the racing line.
Absolutely. Still going to be interesting how this all plays out with the race leaders still with a decent margin, looking like indeed we'll get to the end of lap 19 to lap 20 on the mark. So decent on the fuel, to say the very least, for the rest of the way, and still leads by 9+ seconds. Should note that Ramler is about a couple seconds within Jenkins in the 57. He was gone down within under 2 seconds in the past few laps or so in that gap. You see Jenkins just up the road.
Yeah, Rambler starting to work his way back, trying to claw in there after that sort of disastrous opening couple of laps for him. But as we've seen, he is a guy that can have patience. If you look at his first race, which is hard to imagine considering that just impressive performance he put in at Pocono. This is his second race here with the Throwback IndyCar Series. But he's slowly starting to claw in Paul Jenkins here. He's got it down to under 2 seconds by the looks of it. And he's going to just see what he can do here as we come into the first round of pit stops, as David Hall and Julio Compagnoni are the next to come into the pits here.
They come in for their 19th lap. Christopher has indicated he's coming in this lap on his lap 20. Brian Beard, the leader, is also coming to the pit lane this time, and most of the other leaders doing the same. So right on the projection about lap 20 was that expectation, and Ramler gained a ton of time in that final corner to be able to close up that gap under braking.
That was really heads up from him there. And that is one of the sort of intricacies of this track, is that you have to take that long approach on the outside of the hairpin, but the speed limit does not start until the exit of that corner. So you can gain up time. There's going to be no penalties for Ramler there. That's just really good heads up driving as we see Ramler now coming into the jacks, getting up on those air jacks and getting fuel and tires.
You see the car in front very pumped up for the pit stops as they off and away. As Ramler with a decent stop right behind Jenkins. That's about a second or so gained on the pit entry. As a result, they also still, however, 10 seconds behind Brian Beard because he gained an additional couple seconds in his pit stop sequence. So, just about everyone's made their way down to the pit lane. And Paul Jenkins, one of your spotlight drivers tonight, looking to try and keep cool under pressure here. This is the closest anyone's been to him since the start of the race.
I have to give him credit, though, for somebody who said his championship was over after Pocono. He is certainly proving himself wrong, putting in a very calm and consistent drive here at Sonoma.
Absolutely, as he nearly overshot some of the corners there through that chute. Off through turn 7 past the drag strip. Ramler still, though, has the difficult part behind him of he's got to follow right behind tire track to tire track. And as we've seen, several drivers in dirty air have struggled to do that, compared to the clean air for Jenkins to help him handle out of the corners.
Exactly, and part of that problem is Jenkins and Ramler taking alternate lines there, as we've seen these guys do multiple times, multiple drivers doing the same thing. The difficulty with that is that in those two overtaking zones, turn 11 and turn 7, you can take different lines. But coming in through 1, 2, 3, 3A, and 4, there's really only one line. So you have to stick on it, and there's no way around it.
So the overall delta is circulated to 5 to 9 seconds on the dot in this one. For Brian Beard, should note McLaughlin's come in. He stretched to 21 laps after his spin. Should note as well there was a bit of trouble for a few others in this respective race early on, such as the 97 after the pit stop sequence. Webker had a spin out of the carousel, lost about 5-10 seconds. Still 37 to go, this time by for your race leaders. Beard still has a massive gap on the track. The question is going to be, does it stay that way? He's been quick, it seems, DJ. Once the fuel burns right on down in the tank.
That's right, and there are some drivers that just do that they get a little bit more alive while their stint goes on, and Beard really proven that to be one of those guys. You have other drivers that are stronger in the earlier the stints, but you know, it's just kind of one of those things, and Beard clearly hooked up here tonight as you see him coming around that 1 and 2 complex down the hill and back up again into turn 3. He's just got this car on lock. He's not pushing like crazy. Yes, he's got the fastest lap of the race, but he's not going like his life depends on it. He's just trying to maintain this gap of about 8-9 seconds.
And there is a bit of trouble in front of some of the drivers fighting. There's a spin for P3. Chris Stouffer spun around in the 7. Right out of turn 2, right in front of traffic as a lap car also had spun right at the same time as he exited the pit lane.
As we jump back here, taking a look at Ramler as he comes down as... Oh, excuse me, that's Stouffer. Those paint schemes are a little bit similar to my eyes for some reason. And you see here Stouffer coming up the hill, going up 1 and 2. That's one of the caps there, losing it in front of him. That just causes Stouffer to get it wrong, misses apex a little bit, and he's able to catch it and keep going, but it's going to cost him a couple of spots.
Yeah, because when you think about it, yes, he was out of the line, the spinning car, but you're kind of hoping, okay, is that car going to spin across the track? It might distract you for that entry like we've seen.
Exactly. It steals your eyes away, so you're not focused on the apex. That sort of distraction in your brain is going to cause you to not brake as precisely as you need to, and it is so easy to lose it, as we've seen here time and time again, and I think that's exactly what happened to Chris Stouffer.
P4, by the way, was the cars who just avoided all of that. Sets Nose has been holding on to the top 5 all day. Wild Ridge has been quietly having a very strong run tonight as number 67 machine. He is up 3 positions, 24 seconds behind the leader, and actually gaining time to try and break the draft from the number 6.
He's starting to pull away a little bit there, just driving a good race for Wild Ridge. Really solid, really quiet. That's frankly how you get podiums here at Sonoma, as you see him go down the carousel there, not making the mistakes as other people, getting the power down perfectly and making the path here, as he is indeed pulling out on a Cessnos. He's pulled out about 2/10 in the first part of that lap, so good for Wild Ridge.
And if you recognize that name, it's one that's been around the sim race community for about 10 years or so. Wild Ridge competed in PRL action in 2017, was in a championship fight in some of its inaugural seasons, mind you, back in the day. Also competes in various different road course racing series across the service. One of the first times we've seen him in a while on GSRC in this fight here. For position, Wild Ridge, though, making it interesting, misses the corner on the final chicane, heading off to turn 12 again. Lala Sense right back on in and lost both of them a second.
It did, but it's going to pull a Cessnos right up onto his gearbox, but a Cessnos sort of smartly backs off through 1 and 2, giving him a little bit more space, maybe trying to make a line down into turn 4 here, or could be trying to make a move down into the hairpin. Acesnos being very smart, just trying to press his advantage and not overcommit him.
By the way, should note Matricion ended up meeting everyone's favorite danger spot today, the carousel. Looped the 19 around, dropped him back to 13th position as a result. That is a bit up the road from this battle for position between these two cars. The traffic is getting thick for P2. They're gaining time of the leaders. The downside is, look at all this traffic. It's not just the caps now. This is the back half of the field that they're starting to reach as Matricion actually has to move out of the way.
Matricion has to move out of the way, and Rambler there almost gets up the gearbox of Paul Jenkins, has to back off a little bit as they now go up the hill here into 1 and 2, and there's not Rambler. That's Rambler off and into the tires.
Scott List Rambler, unbelievable big time mistake. His car just snapped, it seemed, right up the hill in turn 1.
You see him here. He's trying to get the run on Paul Jenkins as they go up the hill. He starts to brake. It looks like his car was just a little bit sideways. The brake bias just getting away from him and slamming him into the wall. That's going to end Rambler's day here. An absolute heartbreak for a great run for him.
And the first response I think he had was, I'm out of here. He is out of the race. He is among the DNFs. Unfortunate for Rambler, who was one of the quickest cars on the track for this midway point. But Brian Beard, he's now turning the quickest laps on the track as a result, and now his gap between him and Jenkins back to 9.2 seconds after that spin.
Rambler really there just depriving us of a battle I was looking forward to between him and Jenkins. That was going to be a lot of fun as we watch here Brian Beard just laying down lap after lap, continuing to pull away, getting that gap closer and closer to double digits, putting down a masterclass of how to keep calm and composed here at Sonoma.
Absolutely. This moves Wildridge into a podium position. If he can hold on in his machine, this will be an impressive season debut for him if he can hold on. There's still a long ways to go, but he's been fairly consistent. He's also been around the same lap times as the leader when he hasn't been making mistakes. He's had that happen a couple times, though, this run already.
He has, but he kept his cool composure right there as I think that was lap traffic behind him, spinning out in front of him, and he just absolutely, it was Paul, just absolutely able to keep it down and keep it composed. So good on Wildridge there, running really, really well.
That was David Hall specifically that used the tow. Should note that John Capps has had to use the tow, and David Hall is now out of the race. So another DNF on the racetrack. On the bright side, for Ron Capps fans, that means he has the chance to get up to as high as 14th now in the next couple laps. He's already pit twice this race, should note, for both his sets of tires.
He has indeed, and so we'll have to see if he's able to keep moving on up the track there, hopefully getting a good result for his first time here in the Throwback Series.
Indeed. 32 laps to go for this battle at this point. One of the errors we should note that is starting to heat up a little bit. We've seen some mistakes from two drivers tonight, the 7 and the 43. That's Stouffer and Kirby. Stouffer, one of your spotlight drivers tonight. He has been having an interesting one. He went off into the grass about a lap ago. That lost him P5. Justin Kirby, as a result, catched up to him and passed him. Now in this past lap, Stouffer's passed him by again, and now they're back together again. As you take a look from the back end.
Just can't separate these two at all tonight as Kirby gets a pretty decent run there coming out of turn 3 and down into turn 4. He may be able to try to take an advantage here as we'll have to see who is able to get the best of them through this. Both of these guys having a little bit of a troubled race. They're going to look to just try to settle back down here, get calm, get into a rhythm, and not make any more mistakes.
Absolutely. They've made a few spins so far in this run. They're approaching halfway through the said run, expecting halfway in a couple laps or so. 31 to go for these respective drivers. And Kirby, he's had some speed DJ in the past few weeks, in the past few races specifically. But the mistakes have just seemingly piled up for that 43. in the past couple rounds where he had a chance to win a couple times. He crashed both times when he had a chance to win it.
We thought last week he was going to run away with the race there at Pocono until he made the mistake coming off of turn 1 and effectively ended his race. So he's going to be really trying to capitalize here as he's just leaving all those points on the table. Absolute heartbreak for Justin Kirby, as he really just needs to get, I think, one good result under his belt, get his confidence back, and he can start working his way back forward.
Justin Kirby, currently among the top drivers in fast laps and pace. The difficult part is, here's the thing when you have mistakes pile up over and over and over again, you have Christopher spin around again. Christopher, another spin. That's his second in 3 laps.
Whew. And Justin Kirby, very lucky to get through that alive, as we're going to watch back here as Stouffer comes down out of the carousel, gets a little bit of a wider approach there, starts to put the power down too early, and that can happen as you go from that cambered downhill corner to the straight of the drag strip. The car has a tendency to bottom out, get a little bit unsettled. You see him wiggle a little bit halfway through the carousel, crosses that line, and starts to lose it. Heartbreak there for Stouffer.
On the right side, he's still P6, so your race winner at Pocono last week is still getting his composure back together here. That was his 3rd win, by the way, of the season in just 6 starts. However, he did also have a few DNFs at Phoenix, Michigan, and Las Vegas in between said wins.
And we're going to jump back up here to the battle between Diego Asensnos and Paul Wildridge as they make their way into that turn 7A complex and start their way back down through the S's.
Power Panda Motorsports machine has continuously seemingly had the friend of the number 6 all race. If you're Paul, what can you do to try and break away from this? Or try and break the toe, so to speak, of Sentinels, because he's done it a couple times, then he starts to have some mistakes happen, then he ends up gaining time, then there's an error mistake, etc. It's just gone back and forth. The time, it seems, between 9/10 of a second to 1.3 seconds this gap for about 5-10 laps now.
Well, I think, frankly, for Paul Wildridge, he's just got to kind of keep doing what he's doing, and you see him there as he comes over the crest of turn 2, taking that corner a little bit slowly. This is now out to about a 1.1, 1.2 second gap, and that's about the largest I've seen it for a couple of laps. And I think that's because Wildridge is actually trying to slow down a little bit. As counterintuitive as that says, he's not trying to run hot laps. He's just trying to run a lap. And if he's able to do that and keep doing it, that's actually going to pull out his gap farther and farther. That's one of the things of Sonoma. You try to go fast here, you're going to go slow. I know that sounds like a cliche, but it's absolutely true.
Indeed, and we've seen some of the good examples that the fact we have 4 DNFs are running just past the halfway point in this race. Also, it's also the perfect time for clouds to say hello. It's now the coolest the track has been today. In sim time is already past 5 p.m. It's now 79 degrees Fahrenheit. So, very ice cold when you think of Napa Valley.
That can actually happen when you get up there, when that cloud cover comes in. I remember I was at the Laguna Seca race last year up in the same area of the world, and the beginning of that race when the fog layer came over and it got cloudy, it got very cold, and we had to be under blankets until the sun showed, and then it was back up to 112 degrees or whatever it was. But for the drivers, and what matters here on the track is that you've got to pay even more attention to what's going on. These cold temperatures, 78 degrees, that may not sound like a lot, but when you're driving on a track that's 78 degrees, that is like driving on a bucket of ice. You need it to be between about 85 and 95 degrees. That's about perfect temperature for these tires to work properly. This is a bit too cold, and you're going to get a lot of slippage if you're not careful.
Indeed. By the way, P10 is interesting, where Compagnoni, he's having to deal with Patricion. This is about 1:30 or so seconds behind your race leader. They're already a lap down, should note. But this is a grouping which has had some mistakes. Compagnoni has quietly had a few slowdowns and off tracks here and there. Patricion, we've seen have several spins tonight.
Exactly. Both of these drivers just trying to get their way back through the field. and keep everything down. As somebody up there looks like they turned up a little bit of dirt in front of the two of them as they make their way up the hill here. You see these guys learning from their mistakes, taking a little bit of a sharper line off of turn 3A, not having any tendency to run wide there. They don't want to put that tire over. They're learning. They're trying to figure out how to make this track work best for them.
By the way, bad news for anyone who is a fan of the Caps. John Caps is officially out of the race. He had been having significant repairs for about 12 plus minutes. He is done in P17. So officially 4 cars now out of the race. Ron Caps several laps down to the racetrack, 2 laps down. The rest of the top 8 on down is 1 lap down with 7 cars in the lead lap. Make it 6 because Wupker just got lapped this time. So now at this point, you're fighting 4 points right now. What's kind of the mindset now, knowing you've got a few races to go, all on ovals, and some of them, which can be very difficult, DJ?
Well, truthfully, as we jump on board here, and you can see him coming up that hill. This is a great camera angle. You can just see the variations of the track. And how it goes is that's Compagnoni losing it and giving the space to Matricione, able to pull ahead there as we go back to replay.
Let's take a look, and this was just up in front of him, and corner exit. Just a little bit too hard on the gas and just spun him off towards the sand. Able to keep it away from the tire wall, though.
Credit where credit's due. That was a very nice catch. That could have gone a lot worse for Julio Compagnoni there. But good of him to catch it and be able to just sort of drive it under steam onto the track. But to your question, if I'm driving these cars at this point, I'm going to be trying to just keep it going. The last thing I want here is a DNF. I don't care if I'm 3 laps down. I can bring home a decent amount of points. Because I know that what can happen is when you go to some of these ovals, you get the quote-unquote big one. Guys can fly up and slam into the fence. Well, here, we've only seen a few of these guys hit the wall and have irrevocable damage. So I'm just going to try to keep going. If I said it, as I jinx everything there with Andy Yerk and Julio Compagnoni actually coming together. Yerk getting forced onto that inside retaining wall.
And a very, very bad corner exit there. So the commentary's curse has come in about 17 times tonight. That's about the 18th. As Yerk made the mistake in front and nowhere for Compagnoni to go, who, mind you, was already missing the corner exit a little bit in that.
He was. You see Yerk there. That's just, that is just absolute worst place, worst time for the both of them. Yerk not really having anywhere to go. You see him there and then hitting the wall again and just retiring from the race at that point. It looks like at least getting the tow for now. He's going to have to assess and see how that car is.
There is a fast repair available, but him and Compagnoni might have to use them. Chris Stouffer has now also had some problems where Stouffer has had to actually pull in the tow truck and done for the race. So Stouffer, your defending race winner, is out. Brian Beard in position to potentially win a 3rd straight road course race. The downside is he still has to keep it clean for about 25 more laps.
And as we've seen here throughout this race, that's a lot harder said than done. But Brian Beard being, I think, just about the only driver outside of Paul Jenkins that has not had an incident here tonight. So kudos to the both of them.
Should note that Yerk actually did come back on the racetrack, but he's now 13th in his situation. Has a chance to get it back up to 12th as a result of the DNF for Chris Stouffer after his several spins tonight. This has now opened up the door for several drivers to have a big-time race day. Your leader is still having a big lead of 15 seconds, yes. But Wupker might have a shot if he can get some luck at a top 5. Greenlee, he's up 11 spots. Matricione, despite spinning around about a dozen times it seems, he's still in P8. They're separated by about 14 seconds or so in that grouping, but Greenlee, among the more impressive drivers, where he's just quietly, despite his mistakes, just gained spots and taken advantage of everyone's mistakes.
He's up 11 spots on the night, clearly our fastest top mover here on the race. Just putting in a solid race as you ride on board with him here, diving down into the hairpin. That is an absolutely terrifying angle to take as a driver because you need to get it as far over to that wall as possible, and that attenuator sneaks up on you, and every single time when you're right on the perfect line, you swear you're going to smack it and ruin your race. as you see him dive up the hill here and just continue this charge up through the field.
For Greenlee, by the way, this is his 12th start of the season, has had 4 DNFs, 3 top 10s, and 1 top 5, but his average finish about 15.9. After some of the DNFs, including tracks like Iowa, Las Vegas, and most recently Pocono. Some of his best finishes, though, keep in mind, came on some of the road courses. Circuit of the Americas, top 10. Watkins Glen, 11th. Twin Ring Motegi, 14th. So he's been fairly consistent in terms of getting the car to the finish on the road courses.
He has. He's very much, as we see him going through the complex there, getting out of the Ron Capps, getting out of the way for him. You know, he just kind of has this mentality about just slow and steady wins the race. He's a bit of, not trying to imply he's slow, a bit of a tortoise in that way, that he's just doing it the right way. And if you look at some of the DNFs he's gotten on the ovals, he's taken the same approach. He's just gotten taken out by those big hits in front of him. You know, he was a victim of one of the big crashes last week at Pocono. And, you know, sometimes when you're racing an oval, that's just the bad luck that you have. And on a road course, you're better able to avoid those situations.
Yeah, especially since it can be so tight on an oval and you're basically carrying a ton of speed around the racetrack and excess up to 200 miles an hour at some of them. Where the max speeds here tonight have been about 158, 160-ish miles an hour.
As we check back in here with Brian Beard working his way down through the S's and ready to start another lap. We are getting on to about lap 39 or 40 here, so I wouldn't be surprised if we maybe see somebody try to dive into the pits just a hair early. I'm thinking maybe if I'm Diego Asesnos that I may do that to try to get some alternate strategy, but Brian Beard here just absolutely piloting his way to perfection.
Still has to go at least another lap to be able to get towards that green light to make it on fuel. Should note the 47 of Gore ended up getting bit by the carousel again from P10. Kept out of trouble, though, as he was in the middle of the racetrack for some moments. But for Brian Beard, it just seems on these road courses he's so consistent, as we've talked about, and can just take off like we've seen if you allow him the space. And everyone's allowed him the space. Right from the get-go, we've seen it by him gaining 1.3 seconds in one lap.
It's frankly a very Scott Dixon-like performance out of Brian Beard when you look at him at a road course. You know, Dixie just has that ability to pull out the gap and just keep going. I think Beard very much emulating him. And while we appreciate that our title sponsor for the series here is on Beard's car, I think we may need to repaint that of a blue, white, and orange to emulate Dixon if he keeps driving like this.
Possibly. You mentioned the battle for P3 and the potential of strategy. We mentioned Christopher Matricion coming in before he did come in early for his stop. May have to come in for a third. Now with us reaching 20 laps to go, it's going to be the curious point. Does Asensnos elect to come down, or does he try and match on the 67? We're about to have to wait and see, as they do have traffic up the road that may factor in here. That's McLaughlin, who's just up the track in P8.
If I'm Diego Asesnos at this point, I'm going to go guts out here. I'm going to dive to the pits, hope that Paul Wildbridge gets caught up by this traffic, and maybe that is a way to get around him, as he doesn't take my advice, but keeps going. But if I'm Asesnos, I don't think there's an advantage of coming in on the same lap here. I would try to go for an alternate strategy. He hasn't been able to get by Wildridge, and I think any way that you can try to just put yourself ahead of him on track and not have to take the risk of an on-track pass at the monster here that has claimed so many cars, I'd go for that.
Indeed, and also, again, part of the time. Issue 2 is Asensnos just hasn't been good in dirty air today. As soon as he gets back within about even up to 7/10, just starts to push off and ends up losing all the time, reels him back in, starts to push off the corner, has to reel him in. It's almost like a never-ending cycle.
It is. It's like watching Formula One from 4 or 5 years ago before they got some of the downforce levels better figured out with the old tires. As we see him coming in here, I would not be surprised if maybe one of them dives down. We can hope, maybe spice this up a little bit of strategy. But Cessno's just trying to find a way by. As you said, anytime he gets close, he's down now to about getting closer to about a half a tenth. Is he okay? Here we go. Paul Wildridge dives into the pits. Diego Cessno stays out. This is going to be the battle for P3.
And this might be actually a smart call on Cessno's too when you flip the coin, because if he doesn't have to put in as much fuel to get to the end of the race, he might be able to gain a few tenths. He just needs to hope for clean track to be able to jump that 67, I think.
Exactly, and he's clearly has a fast enough car to match pace with Wildridge or potentially even beat him in clean air. So this may be a strategic masterstroke for Cessno's.
Justin Kirby also came down this time by. He'll go into the pit box in front, and that's how big the gap is between them two. Kirby's already in, off and away already is Wildridge with his respective gap. Cessno's, by the way, a 1:15.9 last time by. The leader is also now in this time by. Brian Beard in for his scheduled stop with 18 laps to go.
As we follow here with the Cessno's trying to put in the in-lap of his life as he goes his way down the S's, really just going to be pedaling hard here, trying to get everything he can out to try to beat Paul Wildridge. As I look back, Wildridge making his way down into the carousel right now as a Cessno's is diving into the pits.
So this is now the big telling sign. Can a Cessno's gain enough time on this pit stop sequence as well as with the fueling to be able to save some time? For reference, Beard on his stop a 9.3 second, Paul Wildridge on 8.6 second, and a 36 second hit lane delta. That's how quick it is for much of the drivers. Some of them have gone up, however, to 37 seconds. It's been a difference about 1 second. Here we go. Pit stop this time, and Wildridge is already into the final chicanes.
I think this is going to be very tight, and I don't know if it's going to work out for Cessno's as here comes Wildridge coming around the main straight now. Cessno's starting to head out. Cessno's has got him. Cessno's makes it out into that turn 2 complex, and Wildridge just making his way up the hill. Cessno's able to make that extra strategy work. Brilliant play there for him.
A good job by Cessno's, even with the longer pit stop even. Just showed once he got the clean track, I think, DJ, he was just faster in that period. Now it's the question, can he finally break away and get a podium once again at a road course?
Hopefully for him, he can, and we're going to have to see how Paul Wildridge does now in Cessno's dirty air. And as they start to pull away, this is going to be the battle to watch here. That's obviously the closest battle on track that we have, period. Really good action. We're going to have to see what Wildridge can do. They both get good drive out of turn 7A, and we'll have to see what now that Cessno's tires are up to temperature.
He's already broken away from the red box by about a second or so with that grouping. So he's now pulled off and away to 38.5 seconds behind the race leader. Now takes off and away. So this is now Diego's chance. At his best finish of the season, his previous best was at Road America, where he finished P4 after a big-time scrap for that final podium position at respective race.
And he's already pulled out about a 1.1 second gap according to our monitors. Really starting to pull away. Goes a little bit wide there, a little bit squirrely coming down into turn 3 and 3A. That's going to let Wildridge catch up. So this battle is far from over in the closing race.
Let's take a look on board with Paul in 67 once again, and you can see just trying to keep within range, and this is almost like the inverse now of that. One driver looks like they're about to break away, makes a mistake. Then they close back on in, dirty air factors in. Now a mistake, close back on in. Now it's almost looking like, well, now Paul's getting that same experience that Diego had been getting.
There's got to be a little bit of a smile on Cessno's face there, thinking about that he's going to be forcing Paul to suffer through the same thing that he was forced to suffer through much of that lap. But once again here, Cessno's, even with that mistake coming out of that first part of the lap, able to bring the gap back up to about a second or so as they go into the hairpin, able to get the power down. Good drive out of that corner for Cessno's. He's really able to pull away down the front stretch.
Really good corner exit. Still, though, needs to try and break away, and they have massive traffic up the road. Massive send by Paul. What a late break. That closed up 2/10 on that corner exit alone.
I don't know if he will ever be able to do that again, but that's one of the most impressive braking maneuvers I have seen in this race, as he has now closed right back up onto Diego Cesnos, coming down here through turn 4 and 5 into the carousel if they can keep it together, but down as they get into these high-speed, high downforce necessity corners, as Cesnos able to pull away as the dirty air affecting Paul Wildridge, making it hard for him to pass.
You almost have to wonder, did Paul, in his pit call, maybe decide I could sacrifice just a tiny bit of fuel, knowing we had Diego have a much longer pit stop time, mind you?
Yeah, he could have. I mean, it's a gamble from him, and obviously right now he's going to be kicking himself and second-guessing everything that he has done up to this point, as Cesnos going a little bit wide into that hairpin there, kicking loose a few of the cones leading onto pit lane.
Those poor cones, to say the very least. They do a lot of work across the service that we place back where they belong, just in a moment, but still. Keep in mind, Paul Jenkins is doing what he needs to do for the championship fight. We were discussing how it was down to just above 58 points. He'll lose some of the points gap tonight, but Brian Beard will only gain just a little bit as a result if this continues to stay the way it's looking up at the front.
It's a great drive from Jenkins. I think he knew from the very outset of this race that he didn't really have the speed to keep up with Beard, and so instead he was just driving the race that he could drive, treating this almost like a practice session, just going forward, not trying to take any unnecessary risks, and keep the car on the road at all costs. And that's exactly what he's done. Yeah, he's 21 seconds back from Brian Beard, but at the same time, he's still going to leave this race the championship leader, and that's frankly what matters at the end of the day.
Absolutely, as long as he stays inside the rumble strips and on the pavement for the next 14 laps, coming up 13 this time by. Much of the field at this point, though, has now gone to the spread out rhythm portion, and still have to give credit to Ron Capps. For those who don't know, took part in a lot of SimRacing events starting in April in the 65 machine. Capps competed in the replacement series, competed in many special events, had special car designs designed, and in turn led to real-world paint scheme designs. Tonight, he's in P13, the last car running, yes, but this is not an easy place to drive and not an easy car to drive, and we've seen that this evening. Give credit to Ron Capps for still being in the field tonight after what's been an up-and-down race for him.
I certainly know that for myself, trying to jump in a car like this and run it, I would not be up where Ron is, and so major credit to him. And Justin, we started to talk about it a little bit before, sort of the difference for those who don't know in driving simulators and driving real race cars. One of the things that is most remarkable about these real drivers coming in is they can't feel it. Even if you've got a high level sim with a haptic immersion device or something that moves air around and makes you feel like you're in the sim, so many of these drivers are used to driving by their behinds. They feel the car through their body, and you don't get that on a sim. It's almost a different experience, a different way to drive, and so it takes a while for them to recalculate. And so Ron really diving in at the start of quarantine and doing as well as he have just shows how skilled of a driver he is.
Now, keep in mind, champion in 2016, 65 career event titles, 64 in a funny car, 1 in a top fuel machine, made 123 final rounds in his career, and 24 poles in events so far. So he is a lightning quick drag racer, to say the very least, and has been experimenting with just about every type of car, from stock cars to production cars on the service since the spring.
It's really exciting seeing these real-world guys coming over, whether it's Ron Capps, whether it's any of the NASCAR guys that came over and ran, any of the IndyCar guys. You see some of the retired guys that came over and said, you know what, I want to get back into this. It's an exciting thing, and it's one of the things that makes iRacing so spectacular and so special, because You can't go out onto a baseball diamond and play baseball with Mike Trout or Scherzer or any of the greats, but you can strap into a sim and drive next to Ron Capps or James Hinchcliffe or Dale Earnhardt Jr. And so it brings racing to everybody, and it shows you just how much talent you got to do to drive one of these things. And it's really kind of a cool time to be involved in this service.
Again, in P13 on the track in his first start in this series. Still, though, your race leader, closing in on 11 laps to go. Start of lap 49 this time by, and again, it's just been a masterclass from Brian Beard. Shouldn't surprise you that in Lionheart competition, where he also competes in, his best finishes of the whole season there were road courses. And that's been the case in some cases this season for Brian Beard. We're seeing more.
Just an absolute road course master. And let's be very clear here, Beard is no slouch. He's put in some good results on the ovals as well, bringing home podiums in Michigan, Richmond, and I believe Phoenix, unless my eyes are deceiving me.
Very good, let's put it that way, with 8 top 5s and 9 top 10s. His only wins have come on the road courses, yes. But the speed has been there all season. Did get P2, mind you, right behind Jason Galvin at Phoenix back in August. P3 as well at tracks like Richmond and a few others on the season. So now 10 laps to go this time by. And at this point, what's the mindset now if you're Brian Beard, knowing you did what you needed to do tonight? Now you got to get the job done on oval to have a shot at taking away the title from Paul Jenkins, who, mind you, still has not yet won a race this year.
Well, that's got to be my saving grace, is that I've got to think that I may have a chance to steal wins away from Jenkins. But truthfully, Beard is in the driver's seat. Jenkins is going to be driving the rest of the season in a very defensive posture, sort of Alain Prost-esque, if you will. He's constantly going to be thinking about the championship. And if I'm Brian Beard, I'm going full send every lap that I can when we get to these ovals. I'm going for race wins. I'm going to do everything I can to get in front of Paul Jenkins. And Paul Jenkins just needs to stay back, play it calm, and get consistent top 5 finishes. He should be able to eke out a championship.
He's only finished twice outside the top 10 all season. Pocono, where it was one of his first DNFs. His other being Las Vegas, where he finished 32nd. Every other time, he's finished 5th, 4th, 7th, 2nd, 3rd, 8th. Just about every number except for first. As a driver, how does that make you feel that, yes, you're the points leader on being Mr. Consistency, but you just haven't been able to break through for the race win yet?
I think at the end of the season, looking back, Jenkins will be incredibly happy he'll be able to win the championship. But in the moment, every time you strap into the car, you want to win. And you are disappointed anytime you don't. So there's a little bit of glass half empty, glass half full, I think, with Jenkins' current position in the season.
Still has about a 20-plus second buffer just about on Diego Ascensio's, who's pulled away since the last time we checked on P3 by 3 seconds. So like we were expecting, once the tire wear started to settle in and the fuel mileage started to settle in, Diego was quicker, and we're seeing exactly why. Last time he was about 0.2 quicker than the 67.
He's just been able to eke away slowly and surely each and every lap. He's worked his way around lap traffic very well. It's something we talked about early on. He was able to look ahead, catch them at the right times, and try to get them into a position that would hurt Paul Wildridge. And he's done it to pretty good success every time. So great drive here in the second half of this race from Diego Ascensio's.
Should note, Ron Capps, after running for 2/3 of the race, finally crashed his car coming out of turn 7 last time by, demolished the front nose and cut the back wing off of the car. He is now done for the night, already used his fast repair. There's now 12 cars running on the racetrack as a result in this race. Still though, keep in mind, the positions are not over yet because cars can have mistakes. Andy Yerk, for example, just made a mistake. He's now the last car running, and there still can be drivers who make more mistakes like this one we're about to see on the replay.
Well, it's a mistake from Yerk, but it's one that we've seen before time and time again as he heads up the hill there, gets a little bit too much curb coming through turn 3 and just nails it right into that tire barrier. Once again, Sonoma taking no survivors. You step a toe wrong over here and it will bite you.
And he had to use the tow truck as well. So now there's 11 cars currently on the track. We'll see if he had a faster pair in the bank. Brian Beard continues to bank in more time. He's pulled another second throughout this lap, and he's still the fastest car on the track. A 1:15 flat last time by, half a second quicker than anybody else.
He's half a second quicker than everybody else, and he has been able to lap the entire field up to P5, which is Justin Kirby. So an absolutely amazing performance, as we keep saying here from Beard. I think we may have to revoke the Scott Dixon title and instead start referring to him as a Lewis Hamilton-esque drive here, because that's what this is turning into.
And right on cue, purple lap. It's a 1:14.790, the fastest lap of the night. And this has just been the case where Beard is quicker once the fuel is burned down. Some of the other drivers, they just haven't been able to adapt to the less fuel because they've had struggles with the tires. If you're able to balance that out where you're able to handle the worn tires, in turn drive with the lighter car, you see the results in with the 5 tonight.
Very much so. And for Beard, I think it's a combination of him being able to drive well with the worn tires, and with having the gap that he's had, he was able to start these stints with a little less aggression than some of the other drivers further back, like Asenyos or Kirby or Wubker, or the guys that we've seen really start to struggle when the tires get weak. So he's able to just stretch the length and the life of these tires out longer and longer and be able to run at more consistent rates over time.
6 laps to go this time by. Now for the number 5 machine, by the way. Nice clean track up in front. No lap traffic expected throughout these final few laps, pending mistakes from some of the other cars. The next closest car is McLaughlin in the 90 machine, who is about 3-4 corners up the complex. Yerk as well has not made its way back on the racetrack still after his repairs. Mike is actually, just as I mentioned him, just jumped back into his race car potentially. We'll have to see if Andy Yerk is able to get back rolling for these final few laps. But also give credit as well to the air driver still running, Tyler Gore. We've seen him have some spins tonight in the 47. He's now currently the last car running on the racetrack. Also his first start of the season. Just keeping his car going to make it to the checker flag here, Tyler is.
And that's a gutsy call from Tyler, making Sonoma your first race of the year, so I think he should get a bonus point or two for that alone. But as you see him coming down here, he's really recovered well and put in a relatively steady drive as it's gone along. His fastest lap, about a second or so faster than his sort of average. So driving a pretty consistent race here. He definitely struggled early on, but once he started to get a better feel of this car, he's just put in good, consistent laps, and good for him for being able to see this race out.
He's been racing a few different open wheel events here and there. The Canadian has in recent months made a start in the PRL's USF 2000 Amateur Series back in June, in fact, where he finished 27th with 4 incident points at Barber Motorsports Park. Also a few years ago, starting in batteries not included, if you remember back in the day on GSRC for that, the Williams FW31. His best finish in that was P15 and a couple starts during its 4th campaign. So he's not someone without experience on the open wheel machinery in league racing. It just hasn't worked out his way, it seems, tonight with some of the mistakes.
Exactly, as you see him there make a very veteran move, getting out of the way, slowing down for some faster cars behind him down the main straight so he doesn't get into anybody's way on that.
Yep, just trying to keep it clean, so to speak. For the iRacer since 2015 on the service. Keep in mind, the crazy thing is, he's only got 3 career official series victories during that span. Should note that P3 in all this, it's closed right back up. The 3-second gap we just mentioned, it's disappeared. It's completely just about evaporated.
I'm not sure what happened there with Diego Assesnes and Paul Wildridge. Cessnos just made a mistake, is what I'm probably going to assume. Probably not a full-on spin, just getting a little bit wide, as this is now the battle to watch on track with only 4 laps to go.
Yeah, he had a massive gap for about a few laps, and then you almost have to wonder, was it the lap traffic? Because he did reach Compagnoni. He also reached Gore, as we've seen pull up to the side of the racetrack. Do you think that might have had a major factor in that, where it's like, okay, I've got dirty air off of their cars now?
Well, based off of how Cessnos' car was running behind the dirty air of Paul Wildridge, I think that's certainly a fair assessment, as we see Wildridge running a hair wide there. That's going to cost him a few as he got up onto the curb coming out of turn 2. As we're going to jump back on board with Paul Wildridge.
And this could have been a top 5 gone if he was a couple more inches to the left. Take a look. He's nearly full lock to the right.
Oh, that is an amazing bit of car control to keep it on that rumble strip. And you are right. If he was a millimeter over to the left, I think that car would have been in the tire barriers, and that would have been the end of Paul Wildridge's night.
And because of all this starting to build up here, especially with Matricion now up the road, giving the dirty air to a Cessnos, Justin Kirby's back in the conversation to steal a podium if things get crazy here. There goes the 19 machine to the right side of the track. Now, this might hold up the 67 for the final corner. So there's that now pushing car, so to speak, to try and break it up, actually hurt Wildridge to the point where Kirby's back within a second.
Really heads-up move there from Cessnos, timing that pass of the lap traffic right, making it as inconvenient as possible for Paul Wildridge. That's going to buy him a couple of tenths of a second, as there you see in the background that getting out of the way and letting Justin Kirby come through. This is about, I would say, 3 to 4 seconds separating P3 from P5 right now.
I almost thought, honestly, Kirby was going to run over the 19, who was moving to the right side of the racetrack up the hill in turn 1. Just missed him by about half a car length. But now, they're back separated by about 1.3 seconds apiece in this grouping. Approaching the final few laps of this race. 2 to go this time by.
2 to go, and Brian Beard continues to lead from Paul Jenkins. Those two really just in a class all their own. Behind them, Diego Cessnos, Paul Wildridge, and Justin Kirby, bringing up the last of the cars on the lead lap, and the last of the cars in a nice tight battle here, with Kirby now able to close up within about a second of Paul Wildridge as they come down the S's.
Still that massive gap is still keeping an eye on some of these cars, trying to shuffle for some of the final positions on the table. Kirby looking to try and get up to 4th where he started. Wildridge looking to still continue what's been a solid debut for him. Cessnos looking for his best finish of 2020. All those up online, as Kirby is now the fastest car on the track of 1:14.9 last time by.
Oh, and wow!
Oh, and a spin!
Oh, Paul Wildridge, just second time was not the charm there. He got his tires up over the line and spun out the car, as we see him here diving up the hill, up turn 1 and 2, got over onto that right rumble strip and just lost the car, and that's going to lose him that 4th place position to Justin Kirby.
Just kissed that rumble strip, and now all of a sudden a chance for a podium is gone. He's now P5 with a decent cushion by about a full minute. But this man is now on his final lap. Brian Beard looking to take the checker flag for his 3rd win of the season, all of them on road courses.
Beard just finishing out, as we keep saying time and time again, this masterclass as he comes out of the carousel for the last time and down to that tricky turn 7A double apex hairpin, making his way back down onto the S's for one last time.
Seen the tire smoke. That was from McLaughlin, who crashed again from P9. That's way up the road, though, still from your race leader. But for Brian Beard, he did the job he needed to for this fight tonight. He needed to gain points more and more as this championship comes to its conclusion. Tonight, a big step in fighting for the title. Brian Beard wins his 3rd race of the season. He wins the Grand Prix at Sonoma.
There was never any doubt from the minute the green flag fell. As we jump back on board here with Compagnoni as he crosses through that hairpin for the final time and takes his place to bring it home in P10.
A quiet top 10 for him in front of Gore, but for Paul Jenkins, minimizes the points gains by Beard by finishing in P2. This is about 20 seconds ahead of a Sense Nose. Wupker, meanwhile, has one of his best runs of the season, a P6 plus 5 from his starting grid position. Meanwhile, that battle for third has seen a Sense Nose build a cushion. Behind him, though, it's getting interesting because Kirby and Wildrich had made mistakes this lap. That's near fender to fender and wing to wing as they cross the stripe, with Kirby and Wildridge coming home P4 and P5 in total. At the end of this race tonight, 5 drivers finished on the lead lap, 11 finished to take the checkered flag. What a race, with McLaughlin being the last of them, DJ.
And that will be the final guy to cross the line, with only, as you said, those 11 cars finishing the race, with Andy Yerk not making it.
An impressive race, but with that, we'll take a step aside, but stick around. Post-race coverage is coming up right after this. You're watching the Global Sim Racing Channel, live from the virtual Sonoma Raceway in Sonoma, California. Welcome back to the virtual Sonoma Raceway in Sonoma, California for the Rogue Energy post-race show. Rogue Energy drink is designed to replace unhealthy canned energy drinks, coffee, and even traditional pre-workouts. Rogue Energy is sugar-free and loaded with vitamins, antioxidants, and nootropics. Scoop, shake, drink, win. Use the promo code UCORAINDY to get 10% off of your purchases at rogueenergy.com. Heck of a drive tonight for Brian Beard. It's his third win of the season and his third straight on road courses. He wins by 26 seconds in the Grand Prix of Sonoma over Paul Jenkins. Diego Sense-Nose finishes in third with Kirby and Wildridge rounding out the top 5. We'll be speaking to your podium in just a few moments. Jeff Wupker finished in 6th, first car lap down. Matricion, Greenlee, McLaughlin all finished 1 lap down through P7 through 9, while Compagnoni finished 2 laps down, rounding out your top 10 DJ.
Tyler Gore bringing home the field in P11, followed by the first of our non-finishers, Andy Yerk. Ron Capps coming home in 13th, Chris Stover in 14th. That would be Scottless Rambler coming home in 15th, David Hall behind him, John Capps in 17th, Robert Bluen in 18th, and 19th, Mike Ellis not making the start here tonight.
He did take part a little bit in practice. Unfortunate to see him not make the start tonight. But one of the drivers who had an impressive run tonight was Paul Jenkins. He now joins us in the broadcast booth. P2 finished tonight. Paul, how are you feeling? 27 seconds back of Beard, yes, but P2 nonetheless.
I feel like I got beat up and my lunch money was stolen. This place is killer.
Why is it killer?
I tell you, I mean, this is a very, very technical track. Hold on a second. Okay, sorry about that. No, this is an extremely technical track, and there's a lot of turns that you kind of come over a hill and it unloads the car, and if you're not super careful with this car, it'll bite you real fast. This has turbo lag, and if you get a little aggressive with this track, and it'll bite you hard here.
Indeed, and overall, what was kind of your game plan for tonight, knowing, okay, your points gap was dwindled down after a DNF at Pocono? Was it just damage control, or what was the game plan overall throughout this night?
Well, really, it was make no mistakes. I was just going to end up where I was going to end up, and I knew that Brian had me covered in spades with the times. He was in a class by himself here, so there was no stopping him unless he stopped himself. So my game plan was to make no mistakes and hope that he did. And well, he didn't. But the importance of being clean here cannot be overstated. That good, solid, consistent laps and just tick them off and get to the end. And that's exactly what happened.
You and Brian, by the way, were the only drivers without incident points in this race tonight, but championship is now going to get a little tighter after tonight. The next race, though, goes to a historic racetrack. It's the Milwaukee Mile for the Camp Harvey 200. 200 laps on the docket for an afternoon race. Your thoughts for that race on October the 1st?
Looking forward to it. I enjoy Milwaukee. I really enjoy Milwaukee in this car. I think Brian is still going to be very, very fast. And, he's going to get some points on me here, but it's really a lot of damage control. I think I did what I could to stop the bleeding. And, that DNF last week hurt. And so I'm just, at this point, just trying to make sure that I just get back to being Mr. Consistency and hope the chips fall where they may.
Anyone you want to thank for your run tonight?
Well, you guys for pulling out the Hail Mary. I understand we had some technical difficulties getting on the air, and I'm glad you guys managed to get that done. And, minus 273 for some nice grippy gloves that helped me not lose my mind here. And again, Scott for putting on a great show, and the rest of you guys for driving cleanly. I know we had a lot of new drivers here today, and I was impressed with how they handled themselves and conducted themselves here. And, it's just a good way of getting out. This is the toughest track we run here, and these guys showing up to do this. More power to them, man.
Absolutely. Congratulations on the solid run tonight, P2.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
You too. That's Paul Jenkins coming home in second. DJ Clark is now standing by with the race winner by more than 27 seconds. It's Brian Beer with his third straight road course win.
Brian, there was absolutely no touching you tonight as you led a positively dominant flag-to-flag victory. How was it on a tricky track like Sonoma?
It was pretty sketchy, but I just tried to maintain a decent pace and not try to push the car, because the biggest thing that can happen here with this track and this car is pushing too hard and you're going to spin it around. So, yeah, it was tough. But I'm happy with the result.
I mean, it was really amazing to watch you just put in, 114 low, 115 after another, just putting it in. Any scary moments for you out there at all, or was this all pretty much under control?
I'd say every time I went into turn one. I mean, how I'd been driving the track throughout the week is I'd been kind of tapping the brake a little bit going into one. And after about 20 laps, I was having to just coast it in because every time I even touched the brake, the back end wanted to come around. So I had kind of alter my my driving a little bit midway through that race.
You could have fooled us, Brian. It looked like you were just doing everything the exact same the entire time. So going into Milwaukee next week, you're starting to cut into Paul's points lead. How do you feel about the close of this season in the championship standings?
I feel great, but the Milwaukee race, I'm going to actually be taking a drop. So I have a medical thing I need to do, and so I'm going to miss that one.
I'm sorry to hear that, man. So through to the end of the season, you think you're going to be able to close them down, Milwaukee notwithstanding?
As consistent as Paul is, I think it's going to be really, really close. I think it's going to go down to the last race. That's what I think.
Well, I got to be honest, that makes me excited to be able to call it for you. Anybody you need to thank tonight, Brian?
Yeah, Scott, for putting on a heck of a league. You guys for coming through at the last second. We really appreciate you guys. You do an outstanding job. 9-4 Motorsports and my sponsor, 9-4, and Midwest Simulations, Spotlights, D2 Race Designs, Rogue Energy, and do have to get a shout out to the new guys in the league. We had a bunch of new guys show up tonight, and they did a really, really great job kind of getting out of the way when we came up behind them. So really appreciate that.
Fantastic. Thanks, Brian, and congratulations on an amazingly dominant win tonight.
Thanks, boys.
That was Brian Beard, your race winner tonight, closing down the gap. DJ, your thoughts after this one for what was a consistent race from Beard?
Well, you heard it from Beard. He was actually having to adjust his driving line during the course of that race, and he could have fooled me by those lap times. I think Brian was right in his assessment. This is going to come down to the final race of the year between Paul Jenkins and Brian Beard, and I am excited to be here in the booth with you to see the end of this because it's going to be great.
The next race on the calendar, by the way, is mentioned the Camp Harvey 200. Your thoughts as we go to the Milwaukee Mile for one of the final oval races of the season. Just a couple more on the calendar after this, including Chicagoland in the finale that takes place over at the 1.5 mile at Charlotte.
Well, Milwaukee's unlike really any other track on the service that these cars run. It's flat. There's almost no banking. It's a lot of braking. It's a lot of technique and finesse. So I think it's going to be a real unknown. I think you're going to see guys that have done well on ovals, like maybe we'll see Ray Vaughn or Stouffer come back to fight another day, but who knows? We could see a first-time winner. We could see Paul Jenkins finally get his first win. Milwaukee's going to throw up a lot of question marks.
Of course, a very historic track as well for what could be a pivotal moment for the championship fight. But we'd like to thank you for tuning in for tonight's action from the virtual Sonoma Raceway. I'd like to thank the Ultimate Conquest Online Racing Association for organizing this throwing series, as well as its many sponsors you see on your screen now. D2 Race Designs, Midwest Simulations, along with Rogue Energy, and of course, 9-4 Motorsports. Well, I'd like to quickly ask, are you interested in advertising with GSRC? Our channel's 1 million monthly global impressions are a great way to get your branding seen by a diverse audience. I'll link in the description to the YouTube version of this broadcast tonight to learn more about GSRC. Perfect time to also thank the companies that provide the software and hardware for a broadcast listed up on screen. Additional thanks go to Jude LeWan, who provides our wonderful music. See the screen for how to get a hold of more of her great work. Thanks to the team as well, in DJ and Sean. If you'd like to find out more about GSRC, including the upcoming races, you can find it at globalsimracingchannel.com. If you'd like to help support the channel, check out our merchandise for sale at gsrc.storeview1.com. Or you can check out our social media on Twitter at GSR Channel, Facebook at Global Sim Racing Channel, and Instagram at GSRC_Graham. Don't forget to head over to our YouTube page to hit that big red subscribe button so you don't miss a moment here on the Global Sim Racing Channel. As discussed moments ago, the next race on the schedule goes to the Milwaukee Mile. That's on Thursday, October the 1st. Coverage will start at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time. That is 7:30 p.m. Pacific. Be sure to tune in for what's expected to be an intense race, which could be a factor in the championship fight. We also have plenty of upcoming races you see on your screen coming up, so be sure to check those out and mark them down your calendar. But until next time, race clean, race hard, and we'll see you on the track.